You've been lied to about composting. Not maliciously perhaps, but the sanitized version of composting we've been taught has stripped away one of the most powerful techniques our farming ancestors relied on for centuries. I'm talking about a method so effective it can turn a sluggish, 6-month compost pile into dark, crumbly gold in just 6 to 8 weeks. The catch? Modern sensibilities have practically banned it from polite gardening conversation. I'm gonna let you in on what old-time farmers knew instinctively, the Berkeley hot composting method, turbocharged with strategic livestock manure layering and aggressive turning schedules. This isn't your grandmother's toss-and-forget compost bin. This is composting on steroids, the way it was done when farms needed results fast and couldn't afford to wait around. Let me show you exactly how to harness this forgotten wisdom in your own backyard. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This technique got sidelined because it requires actual work and gets your hands dirty in ways that don't photograph well for Instagram. When composting became a suburban hobby rather than a farm necessity, we sanitized it. We created tidy bins, promoted the set it and forget it approach, and convinced people that real composting meant minimal effort and maximum patience. Our great-grandparents would have laughed at waiting 6 months for compost. They needed finished compost quickly to keep their gardens productive year-round, and they achieved it through intensive hot composting that modern gardeners rarely attempt. The method also relied heavily on fresh animal manures, which many municipalities now restrict or discourage in residential areas due to odor complaints and overzealous homeowners associations. But here's what those regulations and, our modern squeamishness have cost us. We've lost the knowledge of how to create biologically supercharged compost that doesn't just feed plants, but actually transforms soil structure at a fundamental level. Let me explain what happens when you compost the old way. Traditional slow composting relies on mesophilic bacteria that work at moderate temperatures, breaking down materials gradually over many months. But when you create the right conditions with proper ratios, moisture, and, aeration, you trigger thermophilic bacteria that thrive in extreme heat. These heat-loving organisms are absolute workhorses. At temperatures between 130 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, they devour organic matter at an astonishing rate. They break down lignins and cellulose that slow composters barely touch. They destroy weed seeds, pathogens, and pest eggs. Most importantly, they work so fast that you can literally watch your pile shrink day by day. The Berkeley method, developed at the University of California in the 1970s but, based on centuries-old farming practices, proved you could make finished compost in just 14 to 21 days with the right technique. While that timeline might be ambitious for most home gardeners, achieving finished compost in 6 to 8 weeks is absolutely realistic, and that's still 3 to 4 times faster than conventional methods. Here's where our ancestors' wisdom really shines. They understood intuitively what science later confirmed: the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio makes or breaks your compost pile. You need roughly 25 to 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen to create optimal conditions for hot composting. Too much carbon, and decomposition crawls. Too much nitrogen, and you get a smelly, slimy mess. The banned trick that made all the difference was using fresh manure as the primary nitrogen source. Not aged manure, not composted manure, but fresh livestock manure loaded with nitrogen and beneficial microorganisms. Chicken manure was particularly prized because of its high nitrogen content, but horse, cow, and rabbit manure all work beautifully. Start your pile with a layer of coarse material like small branches or corn stalks to ensure air circulation at the base. Then begin layering 6 inches of carbon-rich browns like dried leaves, straw, or shredded cardboard. Next, you want to follow with 2 to 3 inches of fresh manure, then a thin layer of finished compost or garden soil to introduce beneficial microbes. Repeat these layers until your pile reaches at least 3 feet high. Smaller piles just won't generate enough heat to sustain thermophilic composting. Water each layer as you build until the materials are as moist as a wrung-out sponge. This moisture level is, honestly, just critical. Too dry, and microbial activity stalls. Too wet, and you'll create anaerobic conditions that produce foul odors instead of, rich compost. Here's where most modern composters give up, and it's exactly why their piles take forever. Our ancestors turned their compost piles frequently and aggressively, not weekly or when they remembered, but on a strict schedule designed to maintain peak temperatures and introduce oxygen throughout the entire pile. For true hot composting, you need to turn your pile every 3 to 4 days during the first few weeks. Yes, it's work. Yes, you'll build up a sweat. But this is the secret that cuts composting time in half. Each turn reintroduces oxygen to feed those thermophilic bacteria, redistributes moisture, and moves outer material into the hot core where decomposition happens fastest. Use a pitchfork to completely relocate your pile, moving it from one spot to another. Don't just stir it. You want what was on the outside to end up in the middle, and what was in the middle to move to the edges. Check the internal temperature with a compost thermometer. You're aiming for 130 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. If it climbs above 160, turn it immediately to prevent killing off beneficial organisms. After 3 to 4 weeks of this intensive turning schedule, you can slow down to weekly turns. By week 6 to 8, you should have dark, crumbly compost that smells earthy and sweet, with no recognizable pieces of original material remaining. I know not everyone has access to livestock manure, especially if you're gardening in suburban or urban areas. The good news is, you can adapt this method using alternative high-nitrogen materials, though results won't be quite as dramatic. Fresh grass clippings work surprisingly well if you can collect enough. Coffee grounds from local cafes provide excellent nitrogen. Well, let's talk about kitchen scraps. Those fruit and vegetable waste bits can actually stand in for manure if you use enough of them. Some folks even go for alfalfa meal or blood meal as nitrogen boosters. But, buying these amendments does kind of go against the whole free and sustainable vibe of traditional composting. Now, here's the deal with composting. It's all about keeping that carbon to nitrogen ratio in check and sticking to a strict turning schedule. This turning is really what sets hot composting apart from the slow kind, and honestly, it's non-negotiable if you're aiming for quick results. The perks of this method, well, they go way beyond just saving time. You see, hot compost is biologically richer than its slower counterpart. Those high temperatures, they create the perfect conditions for a diverse range of microbial populations to thrive. It's pretty fascinating, really. The finished product contains more beneficial bacteria and fungi that help plants resist disease and access nutrients more efficiently. Hot composting also completely breaks down materials that slow methods can't handle. Those thick vegetable stalks, small branches, and tough root systems that would take years to decompose become friable compost in just a few weeks. You'll recycle more of your garden waste and reduce what heads to the landfill. Perhaps most importantly, you'll develop a deeper understanding of the composting process. You'll learn to read your pile, sensing when it needs water, when it needs turning, and, when the ratios are off. This knowledge transforms you from someone who owns a compost bin into someone who truly grows with soil. Our ancestors weren't working harder for no reason. They understood that rich living soil was the foundation of everything they grew, and honestly, they couldn't afford to wait around for it. We've gotten a bit soft, convinced that composting should be, effortless. But here's the thing, the best things in gardening, just like the best things in life, they require some effort and attention. So, if you're ready to stop waiting months for mediocre compost and start producing garden gold on a timeline that actually matters, give this method an honest try. Start small with one dedicated hot pile. So, just follow the ratios, commit to the turning schedule, and watch what happens. The results will convince you faster than any article ever could. Ready to transform not just your compost but your entire approach to soil building? Go ahead and subscribe to Grow with Soil for more forgotten farming wisdom that honestly delivers real results. And hey, share this article with every gardener you know who's tired of disappointing compost. Let's bring back the methods that actually worked, one pile at a time.